We'll go ahead and get started. Ooh, where did I put this one? I will officially call to order the annual Multnomah County budget hearing. Good morning, my name is Harmony Kitos. I am the chair of the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission. Just as a reminder, the TSCC is a community oversight commission established by the Oregon legislature more than 100 years ago. The commission oversees the budgets of all TSCC member taxing districts and annually conducts a thorough budget review and certification process. Additionally, the TSCC holds public budget hearings to engage with district leadership and provide additional opportunity for public comment before the budget is adopted. I'll now ask my fellow commissioners and the staff to introduce themselves and state if they have any business relationships with the district that could be perceived as a conflict of interest. We'll start at that end.
Good morning. My name is Todd Burton. This is my second year on the commission. I have no business relationships with the county. In my former life, I was a finance officer, budget officer for a few local jurisdictions in the neighborhood here. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Allison Lugo-Knapp. This is my second year on the TSCC. I'm an organizational development consultant, and I have no business with the county.
My name is Rita Moore. This is my first year on the commission. I'm a former political analyst for the state and a former member of the Portland School Board with a certain someone here. And I have no conflicts.
Good morning, Matt Donahue, fourth year on the commission, serving as vice chair as well. My day job is as a municipal bond banker or financial advisor, and I have no business relationships with the county.
And I'm Brittany Albiari. I'm the budget analyst with TSCC.
And I'm Allegra Wilhite, and I'm the executive director with TSCC.
Again, I'm Harmony Kitos. This is my 7th and final year with TSCC, so I've got to be here a bunch. In my other life, I started my career as a middle school math and science teacher. I work in K-12 science curriculum these days. I have no conflicts with the district. Would the county representatives please introduce themselves? Start with.
Thank you. I was just trying to send a text to get all the commissioners here. So good morning, everyone. It's great to have all of you here in the county boardroom, and it's always fun for us to be sitting on this side of the dais for once. I'm Jessica Vega-Peterson. I'm the Multnomah County Chair. I use she, her pronouns.
Good morning, Shannon Singleton. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the commissioner for District 2.
Good morning. I'm Julia Brim-Edwards. I'm the commissioner for District 3, which is southeast and a little bit of East Portland, and I use she, her pronouns.
And we can let folks introduce themselves as they come up to speak too throughout the hearing. We'd like to start with acknowledging the district's receipt of the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the fiscal year 24-25 budget. It's important for us to be able to read and understand the budget, but also for the public as a whole. That transparency is really key for everyone. We'll start with any introductory remarks from the county, after which we'll hear public comment. Then we'll ask our questions and discuss the budget with you. We're looking forward to a robust conversation again this year. As a reminder, since we only have a short time with you today, we encourage you to speak directly and openly and to keep the reading of any written comments brief to allow more back and forth discussion. So I'll now turn the floor over to Chair Jessica Vega-Peterson.
Yes, thank you so much, Harmony. I don't have very long introductory comments. I just wanted to, share what I think we've all known and seen and heard, that this was the first. This is the first budget cycle in many years at the county where we've had significant deficits that have really caused us to approach the budget and to approach the next upcoming fiscal year in a different way than we've had. Even though there have been many challenges like COVID and other things, we always had resources from the federal government that helped lessen the blows of those things. And so this was different. So I do just want to acknowledge that for our departments, for the entire organization, this has been a tough budget year. We still have tough conversations ahead, but we really centered our values in the work that we've done, and hopefully that comes through in some of the responses you'll get for your questions today. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll now call on any members of the public who would like to speak today. Each person is limited to 3 minutes of public comment, and we'll let you know when you're nearing the end of your time. Allegra, do we have any members of the public signed up to testify?
We had no one signed up in advance, and I don't believe we have anyone online either. No public comment today.
Great. Okay, we'll dive into our discussion. Allison, you have the first question.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning again. So we understand you have a new data dashboard showing how many people are experiencing homelessness and how many people are being served. This is a positive step forward in better understanding the current landscape of homelessness in our community. What have you learned so far that can help you fine-tune your response to homelessness?
Good morning. Julia Brem-Edwards. It's my question. So for many years, we've had the point-in-time count, and we've known that that has results in an undercount. So we've spent time developing a by name list dashboard that allows us to much better understand both the inflows and the outflows versus just a static point-in-time count. And by having this by name list dashboard, which I think it was April that it got activated, we can see when people are entering the system, what services they're receiving, and whether they're exiting. And one of the things that we have found just initially is that and this allows us to better match services and to know what services are needed. One of the things we're finding is that we are transitioning people into shelter, but the outflow from shelter into housing is not at the expected outflow rate that we're expecting. So we're getting more people coming into the system that are getting out of the system. So the new dashboard is allowing us to see where we have places in the system where we need to apply more resources, or that where we're not getting people moving through to, because ideally they're moving from the streets or from unsheltered homelessness ultimately into housing with services. And so the new dashboard is allowing us to better monitor that versus just this, one day in time of how many people were we able to count. So hopefully we'll be able to match our strategies with what's actually happening with individual people by name.
Creating a real-time tracking system for shelter beds has been a topic of discussion for a number of years. Last fall, the Joint Office launched a pilot covering a small number of providers with plans for full implementation this past January. Can you tell us the status of the project and any preliminary assessment of how it's working?
So the real-time tracking system has been expanded to include all adult shelters with an open referral process, and also it's been expanded its utilization to include outreach workers and other providers throughout the county. The project will also continue to expand and pave the way for a more robust homeless management information system that will integrate this data and functions. So being able to integrate the systems with to know where shelter beds are available, but also where they're needed, what types of shelter beds exist. So ultimately, having that integration will be really important.
Do you have plans to use this tracking system to implement or to impact your evaluation of the success of programs?
Does anybody else want to answer that?
Yeah, thank you for,
More broadly,
We have some other experts here at the table also.
how do you intend to use the data that you're collecting?
from the shelter bed
Yeah.
piece. Yeah, I mean, I think that will help us to really take a look at how long people are staying in certain types of shelter. Where are we finding like vacancies or the beds that we could potentially optimize the system to be bringing more people in, or maybe we need to invest in a different type of shelter if they have better outcomes with people being able to preferring to stay there and not leaving after a certain amount of time and being connected with the services to move on. So,
no, it's in my ear.
oh, hey Jenny, you're okay. I think that was Jenny Madcore, who's the voice from above. Sorry, lost my track. But this is, and I think that the tool and expanding the tool from the pilot to having more and more beds in the system is going to be really key. I'm very interested as the mayor is moving to his overnight shelter beds to making sure those are included in the system, and those are part of both the data tracking and the tracking of the usage of and the vacancies. So like creating that seamless system overall is going to help us, I think, optimize the system.
One last question. Does this tracking system include only shelter beds, or is it expanding to cover any other housing-related programs?
At this point, this is about adult shelter beds.
Okay, thank you.
Is the dashboard shared with the city? Like, what is the overlap, you know, and the shared information happening between the city, the county, metro? Yeah, all those pieces.
So the original pilot was actually done in partnership with the city, so that, and then it was talking, and then we were looking at expanding it to other shelters outside of some of their systems. And then just in terms of like, not just the shelter, but the HMIS data system overall, that is definitely something that we are sharing broadly, that information system. In fact, Multnomah County is administrating this, but this is something that will be used across the Tri-County area.
So could you tell us more about how you make decisions of funding between, say, shelter beds and more permanent supportive housing? And perhaps this data will actually inform your decisions going forward that we just talked about. How do you balance those two approaches, and what strategy do you have to guide those choices?
Thank you for the question. I want to start with, I think you all know none of the reductions that we've had to make are in any policy area are easy, and all of them represent a reduction in services that we would in an ideal system be able to provide. And we've been really thoughtful about ensuring that we're not having a dichotomous conversation. It's not shelter or permanent supportive housing. That we really need eviction prevention, we need emergency shelter, we need rent assistance to move people out of shelter and back into housing. We need more transitional recovery housing. We need more types of housing to serve people with severe and persistent mental illness. Right now we have the state hospital or PSH, and there's nothing in between, but there are actually different levels of care that we're missing in this state. And then additionally, we need more PSH. And I think we're really trying to be thoughtful about what is the responsibility of the county and homeless services, and what is the responsibility of the healthcare system, and how do we work with the state to ensure that we're getting the resources we need for things like that transitional recovery housing and the housing for folks with mental illness. The reality is that we're trying to build a system that is currently under-resourced, and therefore seeking to find that balanced approach to ensure that we aren't depriving one part of the system. Otherwise, the whole system becomes sticky with bottlenecks. We had a situation a few years ago where folks couldn't get out of transitional recovery housing and back into permanent housing because there wasn't units. And so how do we unstick those bottlenecks in the system? And then we're needing to respond to a growing number of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. I think you heard from my colleague earlier about the more people becoming homeless than we're able to house every month. And this really prompted a growth in our shelter system. That said, we all recognize that we have to have that balanced investment strategy. So we started these conversations as a board this summer through some work sessions that I asked for to analyze the shelter system and the outreach system. And we'll continue those conversations with our city colleagues. We recently had a joint session with them and talked a little bit about the data that we saw, including outcomes and cost. And then we have our homelessness response system steering and oversight committee meeting that is county, city of Portland, city of Gresham, and some of our healthcare and housing experts in the community. And these discussions will be grounded in that data and the cost. And we'll have to make some difficult decisions again next year, we think. But we're committed to making sure we don't set up a system that funds only shelter, leaving us without the ability to get people out of shelter and back into housing. We need that throughput, and that requires us to continually monitor and adjust as we're moving forward, as the data will tell us over the next year what the investments for this year. We also need more housing that people can afford, and this is a conversation we continue to have with our colleagues at the City of Portland in the development of housing. We need more rent assistance to support people moving back in, no matter where their journey takes them. Some people can go straight from the street into housing, some go through shelter. We need rent assistance at all of those places so that we can really help folks get back inside. Our approach is based on a number of things, including the new data set and dashboard. And the new dashboard allowing us to see that monthly inflow and outflow will really help us know where those pinch points are for people and where we need to invest some more resource, along with more detail on who is being served and understanding if different types of shelter models are more effective for different people. Then we'll have that ability to start to understand, because that by name list will tell us what their journey looks like. This year, we'll also include some studies on rapid rehousing, outreach, and the Department of Homeless Services Department has a pathway study with PSU, which will identify the strengths and barriers within our system planned for this coming fiscal year. The Homeless Services Department approved budget includes continued funding for 1,726 PSH units, and the Multnomah County Supportive Housing Services Local Implementation Plan includes a funding for at least 2,235 PSH units. And this is part of the larger metro goal to create 5,000 in the region. So we're on a good path on that goal on PSH for now. And the goal is based on the regional data from 2017. And so that's really what we're continuing to focus on, and I think have more conversations with Metro in the coming months.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, I have a follow-up. I mean, just saying. So it sounds like you're being very thoughtful about all of this in terms of shrinking resources. So would you say that what area is getting more investment than the others, or is it, that's a simplistic way to think about it? I mean, you're looking at where you get, for lack of a better term, the most bang for your buck in terms of providing the services.
We are looking at that, and part of that analysis has included the cost. So understanding not only what is the cost of each type of shelter, but then knowing how long are people staying. So we're trying to understand if there's shorter length of stay or better outcomes from certain types of shelter, should we be thinking about changing the way we invest? And by we, I mean us and the city. So those are conversations we're having jointly. I don't think at this time that we're feeling like there's overinvestment in any particular space. We're really trying to come with that balanced approach to both and making sure we're not decreasing. We don't want to close a bunch of shelters, but we also know we have to have that rent assistance and that PSH.
Just to follow up, and this is a question really related to the beginning of your budget process when you identified the large funding gap for these services. Can you give us a description of how you began through your budget process to begin to close that gap, please?
Yeah, so if you remember, the updated revenue forecast from Metro came in December, and that was, and so I had already sent out my first fall guidance to the departments that they should consider as they were putting together their budget proposals. So this came as the process had already started. And it had impacts not just for FY26, which is the budget that we're talking about today, but actually for this fiscal year that we're in, FY25, meaning that the budget that we had adopted was we were actually not going to be receiving the number of SHS dollars that we had planned and budgeted for, and that we're currently, funding the work that we were doing. So it was actually two things that had to be looked at: was how we were going to close the gap for FY25, and then how we were going to approach the gap in FY26. So for FY25, we used a lot of the reserves. They also looked at programs or dollars that hadn't been spent, and looked where they might be able to have some savings there. And then a normal part of the process is when we, when we hear back from our providers that some of them aren't going to be able to spend all the dollars, or there were leftover dollars, we would go out to providers and say, hey, does anybody else need some extra money for the end of the year? We weren't able to do that for this year. So that was kind of this fiscal year. For the 26, then it was just really looking at, what are the programs, what are some of the plans, whether it's the Homeless Response Action Plan or our SHS local implementation plan that Commissioner Singleton referred to, and what are some of the goals and objectives we need to meet and over what time period, and how does that factor into the dollars that we are going to be spending and allocating. And then we looked at some of the really critical work that I think, as we're really trying to turn the tide, using the data that we have to understand inflow and outflow and really turn the tide in reducing the number of people experiencing homelessness and making sure people have what they need to move successfully through the system. Like, how are we making sure that we're not over-investing in one area to to really, pull the bottom out of that system that we have been creating over the last several years. And then, recognizing that because we had had so many dollars that were a one-time only in nature or unanticipated, looking at some of those investments, while important and obviously providing good services, really we're using more of those one-time only dollars rather than the ongoing kind of base SHS revenue that were to be expected. So all of those were part of the work in looking at the budget for this next fiscal year.
Just a clarification so I understand. So you're talking about the inflow and outflow at various stages. And so permanent supportive housing, is that intended to be actually permanent, or is the expectation that people will stay and then at some point move on to something else?
Permanent supportive housing is intended to be permanent. It specifically serves people who have long-term homelessness, so what HUD calls chronically homeless, out there for over a year or more, and additionally having a disabling condition. And so generally we have folks who have a permanent disability in these types of in the PSH programs, and so they are intended to be permanent. We do see some spaces where folks are able to step down, and so we've had a partnership with Home Forward for a long time where we try to help people move. We don't end people's poverty. And so they might still need rent assistance, but they don't need all the support services. So we do have some that are able to step down in a level of care that we can open up more PSH, but generally folks stay for the long term.
Okay, and the ultimate goal is 5,000 of those?
For the metro region, it's 5,000. For Multnomah County's portion, it is 2,235.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question we were talking about more and more folks entering into the system, and I've heard multiple mentions of rental assistance, which I know we've talked about in the past few years when there was all those one-time federal dollars helping kind of on the prevention side, right? People experiencing housing insecurity or instability and kind of helping to shore up that end of the pipeline, right? Like the folks that are on the edge, maybe housed now, but on the edge or who have been homeless and then in and out kind of these systems. And I'm curious we have good dashboards for the shelter beds and who's experiencing homelessness. What about these folks on the margin, like are really like housing insecure, vulnerable populations? What kind of tracking systems or support systems are in place, or because of like kind of the loss of those one-time dollars, we're really focused on who's in the system now? Just give me some insight there.
Yes, so I think it's really, we're going back to what the system looked like before we had all those COVID dollars, where we still have eviction prevention. It's just not at the dollar amount level that we would like to. So that is still happening, where there's work to make sure that those who are housing unstable have that rent assistance, but also additional services through our Multnomah Stability Initiative. And so we call it the MSI program. So it's more broad-based. There's utility assistance, there's food assistance, there's other things to wrap those supports around people. But honestly, I expect we'll serve less people because we have less dollars.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit. You all do so much work. We're going to talk a little bit about Preschool for All. Preschool for All's current model assumes 80% of existing preschool seats being converted to Preschool for All by 2030. But a recent audit found that only around 11% of potential licensed sites are participating. Has that number improved at all since the audit was released? And what feedback are you receiving from providers in terms of them choosing not to participate? What are the barriers moving them from, private providers into the Preschool for All system?
Good morning. Yeah, respond to that. My name is Commissioner Jones-Dixon from District 4. To reach universal preschool in 2030, Preschool for All needs to create new seats and develop partnerships with providers to stabilize existing seats. We estimate that this means PFA, or Preschool for All, needs to stabilize approximately 7,000 existing seats and help create approximately 4,000 new seats. As of fiscal year 2026, over 1/3 of the 1,300 of preschool for all seats are new. These seats didn't exist before preschool for all started. By participating in preschool for all, providers receive stable and timely funding that helps them pay their staff and run their businesses. Because of this, many of our existing providers are able to expand. Next year, 23% of current existing providers will be growing their preschool for all partnership to another location. Some of that growth is made possible through the preschool for all facilities funding. There are a couple of primary reasons why a provider might not decide to become part of the preschool for all at any stage. One of the major concerns that we hear from providers is that they are unable to choose which children and families they serve, and they may not be able to meet all of the children's needs. We must continue to engage potential providers and understand more about why they are not choosing to participate, and discuss as a board how we should address those roadblocks. I believe we're doing that by we have 2 tables that we are setting up with providers to receive direct feedback through our director. Preschool for All is creating free public preschool, which means that just like a K through 12 school, providers must serve the families that they are matched with. We support providers to do this well with coaching, funding to increase staff wages, professional development, and funding to support the inclusion of children with disabilities. We continue to see a high interest from preschool providers to join the program. Preschool for All is grown from 80 providers to 127 providers within the next year, an increase of almost 50 new providers. And then some of the personal feedback that I've received out in my district with providers, it's a lot of it has to do with the application process, and some of that's going to be addressed, or I believe a lot of that will be addressed through the table that we're forming. Any follow-up questions?
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
We've heard some concerns about the licensing process or like challenges with new preschool programs getting licensed. Can you tell us a little about the process for licensure and what the specific numbers of hours are required for that licensure?
That's a really good question. I will pass it to the chair and the director if she's here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and thank you for handling the meat of the question. So the licensing is actually handled at the state level. So childcare licensing is led by the Oregon Department of Early Learning and Care, and there are currently 3 types of childcare licenses for preschool: registered family, certified family, and certified center. Registered and certified family licenses are for childcare in a residential home, and certified center licenses are for childcare in a commercial building. So there are currently 982 childcare facilities in Multnomah County, and this includes 330 certified centers, 343 certified family sites, and 309 registered family sites. Preschool for All focus on certified centers and certified family locations because they must meet higher health and safety standards. The general step in the process, and I will say the state doesn't have a separate licensing for preschools. It is a child care license that we're talking about here. The general step in the process to become licensed are to submit an application, enroll in the Central Background Registry, have an initial site inspection by a child care licensor, and then complete a follow-up inspection when children are present. And that licensing process normally takes about 3 to 6 weeks. Programs need to ensure that they meet the requirements for this type of license that they are applying to. So that includes staff education levels, that includes planning and zoning requirements, building codes, environmental health requirements, fire marshal approval, and water testing for lead. There are no licensing requirements for the number of hours that a program must provide care. I think the primary challenges about preschool spaces that we hear about from new child care providers are related to the early steps that happen before submitting an application for licensing. Certified centers must navigate a complex and expensive process for finding a space and meeting building codes for occupancy. Certified centers must be located in a building that has an occupation designation that aligns with child care use. Changing occupation requires a permit and can be a lengthy and expensive process. And the intricacies and complexities of opening a certified center are actually detailed in a report by Prosper Portland called the Child Care Facilities Navigator Report that was just released in March of this year. So and I think that does a good job of talking through some of the challenges. In addition, in addition to funding capital projects, The Preschool for All Facilities Fund also provides technical assistance, which we have heard is is one of the things that's needed to help preschool programs through the complex processes. So I hope that answers your question in terms of just kind of the things that have to go through just to get licensed in the first place to be a child care center, let alone before they, would become a preschool for all site.
Yep, so tell me if I missed the numbers. There's more than 900 sites licensed already in the county, and Preschool for All has 125-ish.
So in the fall, we're going to have 218 different locations.
And those are new or existing?
So those are a combination of both.
Yeah. I think we're just trying to get a sense of like the gap there, right? Like why aren't if it's that providers are licensed already or that the state program, what's the barrier like moving into the system? And I think we've heard a couple, and there was a news article a while back about like the daycare to preschool transition, and that being a struggle for providers and families, right? That the seats are different. They're not necessarily guaranteed for the same kids. What kind of work is the county doing to kind of bridge those gaps, maybe just with providers but also with families, and conversation about what Preschool for All is meant to provide and how soon?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. One of there's a lot of, we have goals for Preschool for All that are obviously growing to universal access by 2030, but it was very intentional that in the early years of the program, we were focusing on priority populations that had the least access to quality preschool at the beginning, at the initiation of the program. And one of the things that we saw in conflict was the continuation of care, where if somebody was a 2-year-old in a childcare facility, that they would be guaranteed a seat, and the goal of addressing the priority populations. And so in the earlier years, when we were dealing with smaller centers and just had a fewer number of seats, we had, we were serving, for instance, children in poverty or children of color at higher rates, for instance, than we did after we saw the impacts of that continuation of care. So one of the intentional things was to modify that policy, the continuation of care, so that there were not 100% guaranteed, so that there were spaces for those matches to happen to bring children in who we were trying to make sure had access to quality preschool. And of course, and I think that's what has been referred to as like there are challenges with this. So I really appreciate the Preschool and Early Learning Division for focusing on like hearing and listening to the provider community and actually setting up new ways of having of being able to be in communication with providers so that they can understand those and work through some of those challenges and obstacles that providers see of becoming a part of the program, but ultimately serving the program. I will say, as we continue to grow and make more seats available, this will become less of a problem.
We also noted that 10 hours of kid present time daily are required to be licensed, and that seems more like daycare licensing rules than necessarily a preschool, right? 10 hours is significantly longer than like a school day, necessarily like for elementary school or what we might consider preschool. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And if we're off base, let us know. But are facilities providing preschool and after-school care that count towards eligible expenses for Preschool for All? And if so, do you believe this aligns with the original program intent communicated to voters?
Yeah, so Preschool for All actually has a variety of types of sites. So some are school year, school day, right? So that is that's less than 10 hours. Some are year round and 10-day programs, 10-hour programs. And part of that was in the early conversations that we had with parents as we were creating Preschool for All was that if there wasn't going to be a workday long program, then they weren't going to be able to take advantage. For instance, like if they had free preschool up until 3 o'clock, but then they had to pick their kid up at 3 and take them to another place for the last couple hours, they weren't going to actually participate in the program at all. So it was looking at that. I think as the program goes and as we have a better understanding of which models people are choosing to go into, like when they talk about their preferences as they're enrolling, that will help us, I think, understand exactly what's going to be needed in terms of that. I will say that I think as we get to universal, one of the questions that needs to be answered is, will we continue to be able to provide 10 hours of care for free for everyone, or are we going to go back to the original model, which was looking at the self-sufficiency standard, or about 350% of the median family income, or federal poverty level, excuse me.
I have a follow-up question as well, just to switch gears a little bit. So we've heard some reports in the community of either the lack of knowledge or the lack of space available, particularly for bilingual families in Preschool for All. And so just curious as to what your response would be for that, how are those programs or the availability for the programs being communicated? Do you feel like there's enough availability for families where English may not be their first language for the sites, and the availability for bilingual, for bilingual providers? And how are you measuring that?
Yeah, so there's surveying done on about demographics and language information about our providers, what our families are looking for, all of that. I don't have that information right at my fingertips, but I do know that, and so I don't want to say something incorrect, but there was, again, because we were focusing on serving priority populations, and one of those was families whose first language or language spoken in the home wasn't necessarily English. There was a lot of intentional effort to try to bring in bilingual and culturally specific providers for that. So we will definitely follow up with you, but that is something that I think that has been intentional in trying to bring those in and provide the supports for those providers through coaching, through development, because we know we want to make sure that we are creating preschool environments and we are bringing in preschool providers that match the needs of the families that we're trying to serve.
So marrying our questions a little bit, so right now, Preschool for All requires 10-hour kid present time availability. Is there flexibility in the system kind of moving forward for maybe some more responsiveness to like community needs, right? Like some cultural responsiveness. Some communities don't want a 10-hour day, don't want even necessarily a full-hour day or full day, right? Maybe half day. Is there flexibility in the responsiveness of the program to provide kind of a wide variety? We know it provides a variety of types of care to some degree, right? But like in terms of the timing or flexible days or things like that, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like I said, there are different, they don't all look like 10-hour days. So some of them, or year-round programs, some of them more school day. There is though a minimum number of hours that are required in order to make sure, that really is based on the research of how much quality preschool, dosage basically do children need in order to get the learning that shows that they are going to, meet their peers as they're entering kindergarten. And so there's a certain number of hours that we don't go down, but there's actually a wide variety of different types of programs that go in.
Can you give us a sense of the cost per child for a seat? And if you don't have the numbers in front of you, you can send it to us. What we're curious about is whether the costs are expected to decrease as the availability scales up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I think, there's a lot of work of bringing in new providers and a lot of the early startup and coaching costs, right? As we continue to grow the program, those are still going to be, we want to continue to provide the technical assistance and the coaching that's necessary, but it may look differently. So we'll get that. I will say it looks different based on if it is a school day, school year program seat, or if it is a year-round 10-hour seat. So we will get those numbers. I know I don't have them in my notes, but we actually just heard those numbers when Preschool for All did their budget presentation just like a week ago. So I'll make sure that we get that information to you.
So last year we spoke with you about the Flexion program, very complex and ambitious program that was just being launched. And then in February, there's a press release the county shared that 212 individuals had been served so far. Will you tell us more about this program? I think there's like confusion in the community about what it does and how it works. And so is there enough treatment options and other service providers available to meet this demand in this program?
Hi, for the record, my name is Megan Moyer. I'm Multnomah County Commissioner, District 1, and I was caught behind a train. So sorry for being late.
But then under it, right?
Yes. So the Multnomah County Deflection Program enables a warm handoff from law enforcement to our Pathway Centers workers who connect individuals with services such as substance use and behavioral health services in lieu of a possession of a controlled substance misdemeanor arrest. This program began in partnership with the County Health Department, our local law enforcement agencies, the District Attorney's Office, and the courts. The county runs deflection out of the Coordinated Care Pathway Center, which is a facility where law enforcement can easily bring eligible individuals to receive medical and substance use disorder screening and engage in case management to get connected to a range of SUD and supportive services. Deflection is an alternative to arrest that is optional. As of April 28th, 2025, voluntary sobering services were made available at the Pathway Center and can be accessed through when appropriate by deflected individuals. In Multnomah County, a person is eligible for deflection if they could have been charged with possession of a controlled substance and are not committing another crime at that time. Did not have an open warrant, are not a danger to themselves or others, and have not failed to complete deflection in the prior 30 days. The eligibility criteria allows people to be deflected multiple times as long as they access services within each of their 30-day deflection windows. Those who do not access those services within that time would not be offered deflection for the subsequent 30 days. This design attempts to balance the needs for accountability with the understanding that recovery takes time. The people served by deflection, many of whom are, sorry, I just jumped to a very weird place. I just lost my place. Oh, it really jumped. Okay. Many of whom are houseless and in need of medical and behavioral health care also need other supportive services so they can stop using. Am I supposed to read the next part too? Or am I waiting for them to ask that question?
Did you want to hear more information about the capacity of our substance use disorder system?
Yeah, okay. That is a great question. When an individual receives a care plan, the person is offered connection to services, including outpatient and residential treatment services, peer supports, recovery supportive housing, withdrawal management, medication-assisted treatment, and others. The referrals are to services that exist within the community, recognizing the limitations of capacity for treatment and other SUD-related services. The county is working toward increasing service capacity for SUD services alongside implementing the deflection program. For the first stage of this includes making 24-hour sobering services available, which include observation and offering comfort medication available to those who come through deflection if appropriate. Additional services can be brought online that can be utilized by those in deflection after the county opens a sobering and crisis stabilization center in 2027. Withdrawal management and medication-assisted treatment services, in addition to an expansion of sobering services, will be offered at the time. I think it's also fair to say that there are gaps in our SED system. and that we are unable to refer people to services on demand. We are looking at there have been, okay, I'm going to say this a little bit differently. We are not the only partner who has responsibility for the continuum of care for SED treatment. And so this is, an approach that we are working with partners on, one of which is that we are working on a program with Oregon Health Sciences University's Behavioral Health Coordination Center to let us better understand our regional bed capacity so that we know where we can connect people to services, where there is availability. And we are also working off the 2023 OHSU Substance Use Disorder Gap Analysis and Inventory Report, which provides an overview of the gaps in our services, which we can make available to you. Additionally, the health department completed a CAST rapid assessment in the fall of 2024 to look at the capacity of organizations in Multnomah County that work across the behavioral health continuum of care. 93 organizations within the SUD continuum were included in this assessment. Key findings included there are gaps in the behavioral health workforce, specifically those there is a continued need for increasing the presence of substance use counselors and qualified mental health professionals. The county has a good supply of Oxford House and level 1 recovery residential beds, but could add additional level 2 and especially level 3 recovery residential services. I would also mention that we have, as an entire state, a total lack of access for people who experience severe mental illness and substance use disorder. There is no residential treatment program in the state of Oregon for that population. Do you want me to address the data?
Yeah, good.
So I just to have understand how the process works. If someone is arrested by police for misdemeanor possession charge, they are given the option to go to a deflection center or get processed in court and go to jail, at least maybe.
Yes, during certain hours.
Yeah, no, so it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week now that we were able to move to that, so yay.
Okay.
Yeah, so the criteria was mentioned earlier, so yes, that's the true. Right now, if they have no other charges except for the drug enforcement misdemeanor or a personal amount of controlled substance, if they don't have any outstanding warrants, and then if they haven't failed the deflection within the last 30 days. And then that they would be offered that option, and they could voluntarily take it or they could choose not to.
And then if they take the deflection option, they go to the center and they can stay there up for 24 hours to sober up, quote unquote?
Yeah, so there's kind of two services or two areas of work that's happening, although there's can be movement from deflection into sobering. So we have the deflection, which is for that population that was identified for House Bill 4002 for the drug enforcement misdemeanors. And they can stay up to 24 hours, although most people do not stay that long. They really go into their, have, a kind of a review and assessment. They meet with a caseworker, they work through that, they get some of the care that they need. If they choose to, they can move into the most recently opened part of our pathway, coordinated care pathway center, which is the 24-hour sobering, where the 13 beds that we have there. So that is an option that actually people have taken up on. But sobering is also available for, at this point, law enforcement to bring people directly into sobering without having to have a drug enforcement misdemeanor or charge for that.
And then when they leave, they have some requirements to be checking in for 30 days to show that they're receiving treatment?
Yeah, so
Or
when,
engaged with the program?
yeah, so when somebody comes in for deflection and have met with their kind of, their peer case navigator, they are given, there's a conversation about what do you need for your next step? What would be most valuable to you? And the goal is to try to connect him to that thing. So sometimes it's a shelter bed, sometimes it's like a medical appointment, sometimes it's detox, sometimes it's sobering, sometimes it's treatment, right? So there's a lot of different options that can be a part of that answer. So so what we want to make sure, and there's a lot of follow-up that happens to ensure this, is that that person, when they have that list of like what their next thing is going to be, that they are following through on that. And so we check in, like if they're referred, for instance, to Hooper Detox, then all efforts will be made to get them there, but just really within the next 30 days, did they go through that? And so we actually have 30 days for them to do that. We actually have an additional 30 days to do some of the administrative follow-up to make sure that that we are checking in with those providers of those different services, and so that we can get that verification that they've done that.
And then if they get arrested again within that 30 days, then the deflection is not an option at that point?
I'm sorry. So if in the past 30, if it's still pending, right, if they're still within that 30-day window, they would still be eligible for deflection again. It would be if there is a concrete, this person did not follow through, they failed at deflection, then they would not be eligible for deflection for another 30 days.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Sure, absolutely.
This all sounds very complicated and requires an enormous amount of coordination across county personnel and also other providers, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, how are you tracking all of that? And what kind of data are you collecting along the way? And how do you, if you are collecting data, what do you intend to do with it down the road in terms of evaluation?
Yeah, so we are collecting data on who is entering into deflection, and then who's engaging, how many unique individuals. So we have our data is actually going to be formally released tomorrow as our updated data, but we have served 283 people since September have been referred to deflection. That's 264 unique individuals. Of those, 183 have engaged through the process of deflection, which is a 65% engagement rate. We've had 169 individuals engaged with the referrals that they were provided. And then we are fully, I don't actually know what that data point means, but we are also, the data we are collecting is the number of referrals from law enforcement into deflection by the specific referral entity. So which local law enforcement is accessing referrals, the type of screenings that we are providing to individuals that come into the Coordinated Care Pathway Center, medical screening, SUD screening, basic needs screening. So we collect all that data as we do that. Services to which deflected individuals are referred as part of their individual care plan that they actually receive. Demographic information included age, race, and gender. Individuals' housing and employment status, whether an individual has successfully completed deflection by accessing at least one service in which they were referred with in a 30-day period. That's the information that we are collecting.
And I would just add, we've had a lot of conversations with the department about how to really connect explicitly with homeless services. And there'll be expansion of referrals with some of the non-law enforcement entities like Portland Street Response and other outreach. And then additionally looking at how are we when folks are leaving deflection, what are opportunities for us to engage with homeless services there as well, so that people don't get sober and then just have to go back to the street. And so there's a lot more, I think, to talk about in what that looks like. I'm kind of hearkening back to our conversation about our shelter assessment and how should we align things. I think there's some opportunity to align clean and sober shelter, for example, with deflection.
Yeah, and I would say we're actively looking at expanding beyond law enforcement, being able to bring individuals. Certainly are looking to some of our law enforcement partners who have not utilized deflection about how to engage more. And then I think we're also looking, as we brought on sobering, how to expand that, as we intentionally gave law enforcement the first, as the door opened for us to be able to see how much capacity they needed before we opened that up to other entities. And I think that that's the process that we're at right now, is being able to see, what has the volume been from law enforcement? Should we talk, are there adjustments to be made for that community? But then also, if we have additional capacity, how can we work with other providers like Portland Street Response and others?
Do you have a real-time tracking capability so that, because as I understand it, you've got all these potential referrals, right? Is somebody who, like the social worker who's talking to a person, does that social worker have access to information about the availability of services in real time?
That isn't the active project that we're working with, or OHSU related to. It is still in development, but the intention is that, yes, that they in fact have, they call it their control center, where they are real time working with providers to identify, who is at capacity, who has capacity, making sure that when that capacity is filled, it's being reflected so that we are able to more successfully place people as close as we can to on demand. We're not there yet.
Do you have an ETA on that tracking system?
I don't know when it's going to be fully
online. Oh, the OHSU?
Yeah.
No, we can follow up with you on that.
Okay. And one last question. Sorry. So are you also collecting data on outcomes? So it sounded like the data you're collecting are sort of outputs, like people seen by whom. Do you have the capacity at this point to collect any information about the outcomes for individuals? Like they not only, went to an appointment, but what then? Like, did they successfully, get into residential treatment, or did they, did they manage to get housing and maintain it, or, whatever?
So I think
that's a much harder thing. I recognize.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember that the work around deflection is a statewide effort, right? And so there are many counties. So the state, so our teams work with other counties. OHSU is actually the entity that's providing technical assistance to all the counties that have opted into deflection, and there's data that's requested of the CJC to track how we're doing. So and this program is not even a year old, right? So I think that there's ongoing efforts to really figure out, like, what is the data that we have? What is the data that, the legislators are going to want to need? What are we going to need to ensure that the program is having the impacts that we want it to? So that's an ongoing conversation. There is going to be a report that's going to come out in September from OHSU talking about some of the best practices and some of the things to consider, for the program statewide. I think that the data piece and the data question is going to be a big part of that as well. But we have done a lot of work at the local level to really make sure that we have the capacity to understand, who's coming in, where, are they going all the way through the system? Are they dropping out at a certain point? What does that mean? And there's been really good cooperation. And that's one thing I think I want to stress is the partnership with law enforcement, with the provider community has been really strong on this. And I think that's why it's been effective.
And we report, in the legislation, we report to uniform data to a statewide database called RedCap data, and they release monthly reports. So we participate in that, and you can see our progress and monthly, as well as other counties that are participating in deflection.
And I just want to acknowledge this is a huge lift. So, no criticism intended here. So, okay, last summer, the decriminalization of certain illegal substances ended, and people can again be arrested for possession. The county is doing work to address some of these charges through the deflection program, which is just getting off the ground. How are things going so far in terms of prosecutions, jail population, that sort of thing?
Okay, I'm taking this question. And we have some slides because what we did is we actually reached out to like the district attorney's office and the sheriff's office to really get the data that you need to understand what the impact has been, since this is really, looking more about prosecutions and jail use and things like that. So we are getting it. Thank you so much, Tasia. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, and then, okay, so this is, so this is the question. Let's go to one more slide. So the first slide, the data that's up here is actually the average daily population in the Multnomah County Jail. So overall, the jail population has grown over the past 2 years at a rate of just under 1% a month. This is in the written response. So it shows an increase of 877 people in custody in November of 2023 to about to 797 for April of this year. So it is growing at 1%. I will acknowledge that there is, right now there's a limited booking criteria that the sheriff has in place because of the jail capacity issue, so there potentially would be higher if there was different booking criteria in place. There was also a change in the presiding judge order requiring more people to be booked into jail when they were arrested than previously, and that has had an upward pressure as well on jail capacity. If we go to the next slide. So this has been primarily due to people staying longer in custody, though. That's what we're seeing, as well as including changes in jail holds because of that presiding judge order that I talked about from January of 2025. There are also changes to bookings for any person booked into custody who has 5 or more historical failure to appears within the last 3 years. So that has been, kind of the tension is that people who are arrested but not necessarily booked in jail, do not then show up for their court date when they need to. So that was some of the basis of expanding the presiding judge order on those charges that were required to be stayed in jail. They may change bookings over time, but again, haven't had that dramatic uptick, I think, because of the booking criteria. The monthly jail bookings have been more or less flat, and so this shows a little bit of the fluctuations from month to month. If we go into the next slide, this is showing the drug enforcement misdemeanor charges specifically. It represents a very minor portion of the overall county jail bookings. So there have been 108 total bookings on those charges since September of 24 when it became recriminalized, against an average of between 1,500 and 1,600 bookings per month in the same interval. So the 108 bookings have had virtually zero impact on jail capacity. The average length of stay in custody for those booking is about 26 hours. The median, though, for folks who are booked is about 4 hours. If we go to the next slide, this is our Department of Community Justice potential impacts. DCJ has seen a limited number of adults come in on supervision as a result of the passage of House Bill 4002. There were 18 adults on supervision with DCJ for drug enforcement misdemeanors as of May 10th of this year. 4 of the 5 adults have initiated and completed the deflection process at the deflection center, with 1 declining to participate. DCJ holds monthly internal coordination meetings to review new cases and the coordination process with system partners to support early information sharing and establish best practices. So if we go to the next slide, this is around the district attorneys and the impact on prosecutions that you were asking about. So since House Bill 4002's passage, reclassified possession of controlled substances as a misdemeanor, the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office has seen a predictable increase in law enforcement referrals for these charges. In the 8 months following the law's enactment, their office received 930 referred cases that included at least 1 charge of possession of a controlled substance or PCS, compared to 387 of such cases in the 8 months prior to the law taking effect. So you can see the jump right there in September. If we go to the next slide, most of the cases that have come through the district attorney's office include at least 1 companion felony charge. So the cases, those are not necessarily being prosecuted as standalones, but with a companion felony charge. The most common co-occurring offenses are unlawful possession of firearms, felony elude, DUII, and property crimes such as theft and unauthorized use of a vehicle. Overall, I think our deflection program has been a worthy pilot that has made impact on the community, and I'm really excited about, again, as I mentioned before, the partnerships that we have with law enforcement, with the provider community. I will just say, I know Commissioner Moyer talked about the quarterly data. The law enforcement has a huge impact on the number of people who come into deflection. So I don't know if you read some articles recently about some of the missions that PPB did in conjunction with Oregon State Police, but we had during the month of May, we had 144 referrals from PPB, which is almost a third, or a little bit more than a third of all the cases that we had come in, because law enforcement is now focusing less on drug dealing and looking more at drug use and trying to use the deflection center as a way for those folks to get connected to treatment. So we're looking at ways to expand access for those providers who are also already working with Portland Police and having them be able to do referrals to the deflection center, as well as opening up the folks who are able to be referred to the sobering, or who are able to refer to our sobering center, to include Portland Street Response and other programs like that, not just law enforcement. So we're really looking at saying, how can we've built these resources, we have them in place, and how can we make sure we're maximizing the impact for people who really do need that pathway to stability and safety and recovery. And I don't know if there were any other slides.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt one sec? Did I hear you correctly that the police are focusing less on drug dealing and more on drug users?
Yeah, so one of the I think bottlenecks for the way that we have initially set up deflection was that it was law enforcement that were required to bring people for deflection. So as the police have more capacity to actually engage with people on who are using and who are eligible for deflection, we are seeing a higher number of people get referred to the deflection center.
Great. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Last year, you talked about your county's budget process and made some objectives for this year to involve more time for review of the proposed budget and the approved budget, particularly with the other commissioners, as well as getting your county budget advisory committees more involved in the process. And my question is for the commissioners in this room, if you could give us an update of how the budget process went this year and share your perspective.
Thanks for this question. And I was surprised when I first came to the county commission last year that we were asked to approve the budget, which is, I would say, like, it's a thing in local budget law. The day after we received the budget, we had not had any public hearings. We hadn't had the community budget advisory committee reports to the commission, and we hadn't had any public hearings. This year, there was 3 weeks between the budget proposal and the motion to approve the budget and send it to TSCC. And while it gave us, it wasn't a 6-inch budget that got dropped on us that then had us approving it the next day. We had an opportunity to look at the executive summary, go through at least some of the major departments, but we still hadn't had our public hearings. We hadn't had, again, the community budget advisory committees. So I voted no this year again, just because approved to me means we're approving the budget. I think it would be, and one of the rationales of why we have this compressed time frame is that we have to transmit the budgets to you all so you can look at it, which I think is a very reasonable thing. But it also then requires us to have this contortion of like what approval means, or like we're really just accepting it so that we can send it to TSCC, although local budget law says we're approving it, and we're also setting some parameters, the tax rates, the sort of the fund levels that you can't go above. So it's better. I felt that at least the budget was out there. People had a chance to review it at a high level. I mean, ideally, again, sort of recognizing that you all need to get it as well, is that we could, in my ideal world, we'd be able to send you the proposed budget without actually having approving it, because I think from a public's perspective, they view the word like we're approving it and we're sending it when we actually haven't even heard from them yet. And I think it just undermines in some ways the sort of credibility of the public process if we're approving it. And again, I don't know what sort of flexibility you have, but to me, it would be better if we just sent you the chair's proposed budget. You can do your review, but then we have our process before we actually have to approve it. So I say better, but I still think from just the public's perception and just the reality is like we should be approving the budget and sort of setting some of the guardrails after we've had time to actually hear from the departments, ask them questions. I mean, we haven't even amendment process yet, which is it's starting right now and going to go through next week. So it just seems still not quite synced up with what I consider to be the budget, what would be the budget approval and ultimately adoption process. But those are just my personal perspective.
Did you get, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say my perspective. So this is my first budget process as a Multnomah County Commissioner. My professional experience with public budget processes is with the Oregon Legislature, which I both was a staffer and an advocate for nearly 20 years. And so a lot of my comparisons are based off of that. And there are things that I really like about our process. There are things I think the state does that would be great to be able to implement. One of the things I think was very successful and important was doing 3 public hearings during this budget process, which I think were very well attended and incredibly informative to the commission. One was at this location, one was in East County, and one was virtually. So I think we were able to get some geographic representation and different voices. The budget process from a commissioner standpoint is a little complicated. And as somebody new, I am still trying to figure out how I do certain things, and I'm constantly trying to be like, is that like at the legislature when you do X, Y, Z? So I would say it's less formally written out and clear, which is challenging when you're new and you're like, how do I navigate this? How do I write a budget amendment? How do we discuss them? How, I would also say the rules related to serial deliberation make it challenging to know where your fellow commissioners are at in order to chart a path forward. This is a process of compromise and collaboration, and it is incredibly difficult to do that. I actually encourage the legislature to rethink some of that, because it is leaving conversations that I think should happen at an elected level to staff. And I don't think that's what the people intended, although I'm thrilled with my staff. It's very hard to just be like, where are you at on this? Should we keep going down this road? Do we need to rethink? And although we do as much of that in public as possible, that's very difficult to we just aren't enough hours in the day to do that, like, check-in. So that is a challenge for us, and I think has made some of this process harder to make progress over. I'm very grateful to our department leaders for their presentations, but also coming back and answering questions and providing subsequent material. It is very difficult to get substantive information at a program level. I would just fundamentally say that lacks. And that is difficult for policy makers to make informed decisions when you don't know how the money is spent, you don't know how many people are served, and you don't know the outcome. I am excited that the chair is looking at revamping our how we present the budget and what information is available. I think that is going to help the commission significantly, and I'm looking forward to conversations about what is the information we really need to make informed decisions, because I would say this legacy practice that we have of program offers are insufficient to make informed decisions. So I look forward to the work that's being done to modernize that and hopefully provide more substantive information.
I guess something I'm curious about is how at the proposed budget stage, before you even come out with your proposed budget, because what we're seeing is mostly a lot of budget advisory committees, the elected officials are all involved with putting together the proposed budget. So it's not really the first time seen once it gets to the proposed budget. And you've got that short window to approval. How involved is the county, the commissioners, or budget advisory groups?
So we're not involved in preparing the proposed budget. As county commissioners, the directors absolutely are.
Okay. I mean, is that something that's possibly on your radar? Because that is a little unusual from at least what we see in the community in terms of the elected officials being involved.
So, you guys all know this. It's interesting because we serve as both the budget committee and then the elected body that has to ultimately adopt the budget. So
Which is true for any organization.
no, some no, that's not true. Yeah. Yeah, if you talk
It
like
is much more
Washington,
varied, but the
Clackamas
budget
County.
committee is also comprised of the elected body on the on the board.
We're solely it's solely the elected officials are also the budget committee, which I think looks different. Like I talked to my colleagues at Washington County, and they have a different process. But that's why we have but that's why we have all of you to help us. This is a very important step in our role. So the way that it works is that we have the departments submit a proposed budget to me, and all of those program offers and everything that they're proposed becomes public in about February. And then I release my budget in April, and that kicks off the public period where we can begin to do public deliberations about the budget at that time. So the program offers that are proposed by the departments are available to the public and to the board in February, but really like the final decisions aren't made public in my budget, are made public to April. And then how we have done it in all prior years except for this year is that the day that my budget was released, it was also then approved by the board. And this year, responding to some of the things that we heard from Commissioner Brim Edwards, there was the additional 3 weeks to read the budget and review it and have some high-level conversations about it before the approval happened. But we still have, I think the important thing is, unlike, for instance, the city of Portland, where the way that they have set up their funds, they can't do a lot of big changes among funds once they've approved the budget. We have a different setup here because we do things at the program offer where there can be lots of amendments between approval and ultimate adoption.
And I think in terms of the timeline that TSCC works, I'll defer to Allegra and conversations with county staff about the timing of the TSCC hearing. There's a little bit of flexibility in that, but that's managed at the staff level, and we'll take that feedback into consideration. We've got one last question. We have the library after.
Can we answer that? I thought the last question was for everybody.
It is in general. We have 8 minutes left before we're supposed to start the library. So, and I do have one more question. We do have one more question that I'd like to get to. So if we keep it brief, and we can go into a few minutes of the library hearing. We did that last year too, and be okay.
I can definitely be brief. I think it's important because I have a different perspective. I don't have an issue with the approved budget. I think I've had very good success in communicating with the constituents in District 2 what that step means. And I do think that we need to have more robust conversation as a board on how we want to approach this process next year, so that we're meeting everybody's needs. I felt like it delayed a little bit our ability to get into the meat of what we want to talk about. And I'm a little worried about the pressure timeline now on passing all the amendments that we need to work through. And so I think we need to have more conversation in the next year or after this budget season. And I will just say on the CBACs, I think that there was really good feedback from them on process improvement. And I know that the director at OCI is working to implement that. So I think that will get better next year too.
Thanks. Any other? Okay. So last question, and I know this is a good lead in. We're talking about your amendment process. There have already been changes or conversation around what was in the proposed and approved budget. We noted that a number of youth and family services programs, school-based mental health counselors, the Nurse and Family Partnership Program, which are serving some of our most vulnerable children and families, are facing cuts or complete elimination. And I know there's already been movement on this. So I think this is more of like a philosophy strategy question. As you approach your amendment process, how are you all balancing the need to deal with current emergent situations, the reaction to crises on the ground, what's happening with the ultimate goal of early intervention to prevent later problems, right? The community building side versus the kind of react to the crisis.
I have a rather long answer written out for this one, so I'm not going to give you the full answer. And I will just talk a little bit about, the process for the executive budget, but obviously that carries through the conversation. And then I'm going to keep it really short if other folks want to answer this question too. I mean, I think you raise a really important point, and that is constantly the struggle, whether it was at the state level or whether now it's at the local level of how does government handle the different types of problems, right? That we can work upstream, that we can work on prevention, but we also have to deal with the urgent, needs and crises that we have in front of us. So I really prioritize looking at the direct services as much as possible, especially for those who are struggling to make ends meet, for those people who are experiencing at risk of homelessness, who are ill, who have disabilities, and really who don't have access to other programs or care other than what the county provides. And that was. It's a balancing act, right? In those, which of those are upstream programs and which of those are, those that are the more urgent ones. I think as we're looking at programs that serve children and families and seniors, communities impacted by disparities and systemic challenges, right? Those are the folks that the county served. Looking at how we improve health outcomes, protect public safety, and strengthen resilience, right? Those are all those things that we're looking at. And like really trying to focus on where administratively we can streamline without that. We did hear, I will say we did hear from some CBACs, for instance, the health department CBACs that cautioned against steep reductions in staffing, infrastructure, and administration. So that was also a challenge, and continues to be a challenge for that. But it's really trying to look at those program and investments that are uniquely Multnomah County provided that people will otherwise not get, and then really trying to, make some hard decisions about the urgency of some of the crises, like for instance, homelessness, and the ongoing needs that we have to serve the broader community. No easy answers.
I do think it's important, and I counter anybody who is implying that there will not be very difficult trade-offs. I think we are very limited by what is discretionary versus mandatory. And, I think we are both unable, but trying to react to reductions we are seeing at the state and federal level, and still have a legal obligation to provide those services. And that is really cutting into the discretionary programs, which unfortunately often are children and family related. But there is no path, regardless of the hard work everybody's doing to try as hard as we can to preserve services. There is no path with our budget situation in which we can pass a budget that does not reduce really important services.
On that note, I just want to thank you all for your candor and your thoughtfulness. It is a hard year for everyone. We're talking to every agency in the county, and everyone is experiencing these same things, the same uncertainty, the same very hard decisions. So we just appreciate your willingness to share with us and with the public as a whole, kind of the thought process behind those decisions, and just the reality of the hard decisions to be made, and that it will feel bad. I think that just acknowledging that is important for our community. So with that, we have some business to take care of. So I will close the hearing and open a regular business meeting of the TSCC. Commissioners, do you have any additional comments on the budget? Allegra, can you please share the staff recommendations for the certification letter?
Yes, I'd be happy to. First, a huge thank you to Multnomah County Budget and Finance staff. A budget of this size and complexity is a huge undertaking. They work so diligently and with grace through challenges, and we so appreciate their professionalism and partnership with TSCC throughout the year. For the fiscal year 25-26 approved budget process, we have no objections and one recommendation. And 3 out of the last 5 years, county expenditures have exceeded appropriations in one or more funds. County staff have been extremely responsive in explaining these issues, why they happened, and have outlined a clear course of action to address the various reasons for the over expenditures. Because over expenditures are a violation of local budget law, and since we see a recurring pattern, we do recommend that the county closely follow the action plan as outlined to ensure compliance with this aspect of the law going forward. Aside from this issue, we found the budget estimates to be reasonable for the purposes stated and in compliance with budget law.
Thank you, Allegra. May I have a motion authorizing the commission to sign the certification letter as recommended with the one recommendation by staff?
So moved.
Thank you.
I will second.
Thanks, Todd. All those in favor of certifying the Multnomah County budget, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So certified. Allegra follows up immediately after this, well, the library's hearing, with your certification letter so that you have all your pieces in place for your budget adoption process. And that will adjourn our meeting. And let's give everybody 5 minutes and then we'll start with the library.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I will officially call to order lots of library scripts and no, hold on, sorry. You think I'm going to tell everybody we're going to get started. I'd be ready. There we go. I will officially call to order the Multnomah County Library budget hearing. Again, my name is Harmony Quiros. I'm the chair of the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission. New folks in the room, so I'm going to go ahead and do my brief reminder of what TSCC is. We are a community oversight commission established by the Oregon legislature more than 100 years ago. We oversee the budgets of all TSCC member taxing districts and annually conduct a thorough budget review and certification process. Additionally, the TSCC holds public budget hearings like this one to engage with district leadership and provide additional opportunity for public comment before the budget's adopted. I'll now ask my fellow commissioners and the staff to introduce themselves and state if they have any business relationships with the district that could be perceived as a conflict of interest and what their local library is.
Good morning. My name is Todd Burton. I'm the second year of the TSCC, and I'm a client of the library. I love the library. I want to thank you for the Belmont Library having the drop-off, and especially the It's Your Lucky Day. You have the books that might be hard to get, and they're just sitting there, so thank you very much.
Hi, good morning. I'm Allison Lugo-Knapp. This is my second year on the TSCC, and my local library is the Selwood Library.
Hi, Matt Donahue, fourth year on the commission, serve as vice chair. I work as my day job as municipal bond banker and financial advisor. I have no business relationships with the library. Is that part of this? Does it matter? Hollywood branch, thank you.
I'm Brittany Abiari. I'm the budget analyst with TSCC. I live out in Washington County, so my library's out that way.
I'm Allegra Wilhite, and I'm executive director with TSCC, and the Belmont Library is also my library. So I've been enjoying seeing all of the up happening.
Again, I'm Harmony Quiros. This is my 7th and final year with TSCC. In my former life, I was a middle school math and science teacher. I work in K-12 science curriculum. Libraries are very close to my heart. We mostly visit the new Holgate Library, also sometimes the Woodstock Library. Sometimes it has better summer reading prizes, is what the kids say. So sometimes we go to both. Would the library represent, go ahead, Rita.
My apologies, I was on a quest for tea, sorry. My name is Rita Moore. This is my first year in the commission. I'm a former policy analyst for the state, and I have no conflicts. St. John's.
Will the library representatives please introduce themselves?
Good morning, Chair Quiros and commissioners. My name is Annie Lewis. I use she and her pronouns, and I am the director of libraries and also serve as the budget officer for the library district.
Hi, good morning. My name is Katie Shifley. I also use she, her pronouns, and I'm the finance and facilities director for the library.
Hi, I'm Dave Ratliff. I use he or they pronouns, and I am the library's interim deputy director.
And should anybody else join you, they can introduce themselves at the beginning. We'll start with any introductory remarks that you might have, after which we'll hear public comment. Then we'll ask our questions and discuss the budget with you. As with the county, we're looking forward to a robust conversation. We only have a short time today and starting a little late. Thank you for your flexibility. We encourage you to speak directly and openly and keep the reading of any written comments brief to allow for a little more back and forth discussion. I'll now turn the floor over to you, Director Lewis.
Good morning. We actually do not have any prepared opening remarks, but I just do want to express my gratitude and appreciation for your service serving on this commission and for your thoughtful questions today.
Thank you. I'll now call on any members of the public who would like to speak. Each person is limited to 3 minutes of public comment, and we'll let you know when you're nearing the end of your time. Allegra, do we have any members of the public signed up to testify?
No, no one has signed up to testify.
Great, we'll dive in, and I get the first question. Director Lewis, this is your first official year as Director of Libraries. We know you served as interim for part of last year. Can you tell us what some of your biggest successes have been so far? What are you most proud of?
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting. I was reflecting on this question this morning, and it's been 1 year to the day that I started in the interim position. So, and I believe this was one of the first milestones in my role last year, and being in front of your commission. So, thank you for the opportunity to speak to this year. It's definitely been a big year. Lots going on in the library districts. I'm happy to reflect on some of those accomplishments. I do want to say that the way the question is worded, it asks about my successes. And while I am definitely proud of being a leader for this organization, none of this is possible without the folks sitting next to me, without folks in the audience here, without our great library staff who make it all happen. But I do want to reflect on a few of the things that we've accomplished this year. So first, I do want to say that it really has been an honor to serve in this role as the library director for Multnomah County Library, particularly following in the footsteps of my predecessor, Bailey Elke, who really laid the vision for the sort of era of transformation that we're in right now. As you noted, began last year in June of 2024 in the interim position and then started in the permanent position in October. I would say that overall in this first year, I am really most proud of successfully leading the library through this period of monumental transformation and change, while kind of staying true to our mission and our values and keeping our service priorities front and center. We are navigating multiple simultaneous changes, including the implementation of a new staffing plan. That was a very significant milestone that occurred in February of this year, and that is a significant part of our FY26 budget submission. We've also had to navigate leadership transition with my colleague Dave Ratliff serving in the interim deputy director position, recruiting for that position currently. And also responding to the shifts in the federal administration's priorities and the impact that's having on libraries. This has all required very steady leadership and clear communication. Also, in 24, starting in July, we opened 3 new libraries, 24, 25. So we opened Holgate, we opened Midland, we opened North Portland, and now we're looking ahead to Albina. So significant work is underway for preparing for that opening. I'm really proud of the library's work to accomplish these milestones, to support our library staff, and also to maintain a standard of excellence for the way that we serve our patrons, particularly during this period of change.
Thank you. We've noticed and appreciated the outreach to the community on library design for your new projects. Based on your experiences so far, what community engagement strategies have been most effective in shaping the design of the new and renovated library spaces?
Thank you for this question. I want to start, there's several questions that are specifically related to the library capital bond, and I will represent the responses today, but I also want to acknowledge that we have a strong leadership team of our bond program management office. My colleagues, Katie Odell, our deputy director of our bond program, is here today in case there's questions that I may not be able to answer, as well as Kate Vance. Just wanted to note that at the outset. So community engagement is really at the heart of the library's capital bond program, which is the significant driver of the services and the staffing that are reflected in our FY26 budget submission. The library building project teams engage community members based on the unique history and the cultures of each of the library's neighborhoods, and they build on existing engagement efforts within the community. The Library Capital Bond Program found several key approaches to be particularly impactful in shaping the design of our projects. First of all, it was a really all hands on deck approach, where architects, designers, construction managers, bond staff, and library staff all directly participate in community conversations. This has really been invaluable, particularly given the different relationships and perspectives that those individuals bring to the conversation. Hearing firsthand from community members about their needs and how they envision the spaces has been really crucial. Second, a key other component is offering paid community engagement opportunities, especially for youth, has really ensured representation from a diverse range of voices. These participants have become true ambassadors for our work. They've contributed throughout the design and even up to the building openings. I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to attend one of our ribbon cuttings and openings, but we do feature our community design advocates or community members who participate in the design process in up to those celebratory events. Lastly, I want to highlight that utilizing a variety of communication channels from broad surveys to smaller focus groups and event tabling has really significantly widened our reach. Additionally, we've invested in translation and interpreting services in Spanish, Russian, Vietnamese, and Chinese. This has really been essential in ensuring greater access, particularly for individuals with limited English proficiency.
So can you identify what have been your most significant lessons from the community program on design, and how might that feedback influence the projects that are to be?
Yes, absolutely. So, and I will again share this. We, of course, engaged our program management office staff for kind of their reflections on this question. And so what they shared is that we've gained valuable insights into the community's priorities for accessible and inclusive spaces, flexible and adaptable layouts, and welcoming environments that reflect the diverse needs of our users. For folks who have visited our Midland Library, we have a sensory room in that space. Holgate, Midland, all of our new chapter locations include a number of accessible features that create a really welcoming environment for folks with a diverse set of needs. In general, I'll share that our patrons have expressed appreciation for the expanded spaces, in particular, having access to more meeting and study areas. Our locations feature a significant expansion of both sort of large meeting rooms and then also smaller study rooms. Community members have also expressed appreciation for vibrant colors and the artwork. Also, there's new features for children and also the design choices that reflect, as I shared, a focus on accessibility. We have heard some dissatisfaction from patrons in terms of some disappointment at the collection size. We have lowered sightlines or lowered shelving to improve sightlines, and this has resulted in the feelings of not having as robust and large of a collection in the renovated and refreshed locations. So that is an aspect that we're sort of hearing as well. I've sort of noted a few of our patron comments that are reflective of the overall responses in general. So here we are, first one, quote, "The artwork and colors throughout the library are so intentional and shows that the community was important in the design process. I love the meeting spaces and the thoughtfulness towards the staff." Second quote, "I love the Midland Library. Our taxes put to such wonderful use." That in particular comment, I attended our Lunar New Year event earlier this year, and I spoke with 3 different individuals who approached me to say that this was just the best investment of their tax dollars. I've heard that multiple times from folks. Next quote, "You have seemed to really focus on an all-inclusive environment for all walks of life. Thank you for making something so welcoming for many different diversities within our community, not just a few." And lastly, this is reflective of the disappointment. "Not enough books. I want to be able to browse a collection. I can't place a hold on a book I don't know exists." So that's certainly feedback that we're taking in. I think the one beautiful thing about our new locations is that they do feature a lot of flexibility for display space and opportunities for our staff to highlight materials to increase that browsability experience as well.
Before I ask my question, I'm curious about the artwork. Did you design or get the feedback from your community? Each area has sort of their unique flavor, and so does the artwork reflect the flavor of those?
Yes, so we are working with the Regional Arts and Culture Council, RAC, to design to engage artists in the design process for the artwork. And so each of the buildings, the process of design with the artist has included actual community engagement in the art pieces. Many of them have. And my colleague Katie Odell is here and can speak in more depth if you're curious to hear more, but absolutely the art installations are very reflective of local artists and also engagement of the community in the actual design process.
And it's so great to hear this, because a lot of what we review and what we're hearing, everybody's struggling with financial constraints, but it's great to hear these kinds of things going on in the community. So I want to talk about the projects right now, and if you could refresh us, which libraries are under construction now and what's sort of upcoming? just for our record and for my education. But since the pandemic, construction costs have gone up for a variety of reasons. Now we're looking at potential tariffs that might affect raw materials, and there's a lot of uncertainty around that. How are you managing that with the projects, and are you having to make adjustments to some of the baseline costs that you've projected?
Yeah, thanks for that question. The library capital bond project team is delivering library construction and renovation projects on schedule and within budget. And so while we have sort of across the entirety of the bond program of work, we've regularly adjusted costs as we get more detailed project information across all of the bond projects. We've been able to maintain budget flexibility thanks to the additional $50 million premium reserve that we have. And we have that reserve due to the specific spend down requirements and how we set up the initial bond financing, as well as additional earned income interest that is part of the overall bond funding source. That premium reserve and the additional interest income has been a real key benefit from our overall ambitious bond schedule. And that as the overall bond schedule has progressed and cost and overall risk uncertainty has decreased, we're right now feeling very positive in terms of our overall bond budget management. At this point in time, we do not anticipate that costs will exceed the available resources that we have for the overall bond. In terms of, you kind of mentioned supply and tariff issues, we have observed that lead times for certain mechanical components, so large electrical switchgear in particular, has been a major issue for several bond projects. Those lead times have had a greater impact on schedule than supply costs in general. But in terms of our overall ability to manage those lead times, they've not caused delays in terms of the overall bond life cycle, like in terms of extending bond projects beyond the overall life cycle of the bond. And our project team has done a fantastic job of planning and sort of adjusting around the long lead times for those switchgear pieces in general, and kind of making long lead time orders well in advance of when we would need them on site for individual projects. As Annie mentioned, we have a couple folks here from the bond team if there are more detailed questions about any of those issues.
Are we hearing that you are experiencing cost increases when you have the capacity to absorb those, or do you have that still safeguard in case you experience that?
What I would say is that, again, like in broad strokes, very early on in the bond program of work, there were significant concerns about the impact of inflation, about supply chain issues, kind of coming out of the pandemic. As we've moved forward through the bond program of work and have far greater certainty around risk and overall costs as we work through major phases of the bond program of work, at this point, we're very confident that we'll come in on budget. Belmont, St. John's, East County Library, Albina Library is kind of still under construction, but very, very close to opening. So we'll be opening that in July.
And then Northwest is also under construction, but because we're currently in a leased facility, the library doesn't need to close as a result. So that construction is underway as well.
So if I recall correctly, you also have a non-bond fund capital reserve. Is that, I can't remember the number, but is that, are those funds dedicated to specific other non-bond projects, or do you have it as like a buffer in case the bond money runs out?
So yes, we do have a separate, so the Library Capital Bond Fund is managed by the Department of County Assets and is specifically and solely dedicated to the work that was laid out as part of the bond measure. We do have a library district capital fund that is within the library district. Those funds are reserved for library district capital projects. We recently updated and kind of have a forward-looking capital improvement, wouldn't call it necessarily capital improvement plan, but an updated look at the total amount of capital improvement funding that we will need, completely unrelated to the bond work that's currently ongoing. We developed that in conjunction with our partners at the Department of County Assets based off of updated facility condition assessments and kind of industry benchmark information for our brand new renovated chapter locations as part of the bond. The thinking being that through the capital bond program, we're basically completely refreshing almost half of our library building portfolio, and it was time to take another look at the capital needs for our entire system, right? And when we carry that out over the next 20 years, we can see that we need to reinvest almost $100 million in our sort of portfolio of library buildings unrelated to the capital bond investments. So that is a reserve for our capital needs going forward that are unrelated to the bond, because we find it critical and sort of long-term sustainable planning for the fiscal health of the library district to be able to keep sort of investing in the capital needs of the system overall.
So coming in hand with the changes to the library's infrastructure are staffing adjustments to better fit community need in the new buildings. So we'd like to better understand how these new spaces are meeting the diverse needs of the community. And under this new staffing plan, staff have moved from direct community programs like pre-literacy and programs that serve underserved communities to staff some of these larger buildings. Do you believe that this is the best way to serve the community? And if so, why? And what are you hearing in terms of feedback from the community about this?
Thank you for the question. For those of you, it sounds like most of you, except one, have on the commission in prior years, you have probably heard Bailey and I think myself last year talking about that Multnomah County Library in terms of square footage is very small in comparison to our peers across the country. We're one of the busiest libraries in the country, but yet our square footage is critically sort of underserving our community. So, and that really, has meant cramped spaces and lack of services that we would otherwise be able to provide with expanded space. So the bond improvements have expanded, or will, once it's completed, expand our total space by about 50%, which is very significant. The new features that our patrons are now enjoying include gender-neutral restrooms to increase accessibility, cultural spaces, so spaces in our locations that were informed by community members and that reflect the cultures that are present within our communities. Also, children's play areas for interactive play with caregivers and children, comfy reading spots, also includes outdoor spaces. These are amenities that our patrons, many community members asked for as part of the design process, and we're proud that several of our buildings do include these enclosed outdoor spaces. We also have teen spaces, so spaces that are really designed for the developmental and social needs of teens, where they can be, hang out, and collaborate in a place that feels comfortable and welcoming. I noted earlier the sensory spaces, as well as reading and study areas. The ECL, East County Library, will have a large auditorium, which is critically needed in Gresham. There isn't a similar facility there in that community. In addition, we have our creative learning spaces. So as I think many of you know, our Rockwood Library has a makerspace, and it's an incredibly popular service that we provide, but Rockwood is just one location in our system. And so with the bond, we've been able to expand sort of mobile creative learning programming through funding with our Library Foundation to bring equipment that increases access to digital art software and other sort of low-tech and high-tech equipment. We've also installed faster internet and that enables us to provide technology access and assistance. So the library's historic lack of space was a factor in creating some of the library's outreach programs over the years. So Multnomah County Library has really been known for these very expansive outreach programs beyond many of our peers across the country, and part of that was really due to the lack of space and the offerings that we could provide in our locations. That being said, outreach is still a critical priority for us, right? We know that not everyone has access to coming into our library spaces, and you'll note that in the FY26 budget, we include ample funding to support continuing a number of outreach services, which I'll reflect on in just a minute. Briefly, though, I want to expand on sort of the physical spaces. So the new physical spaces will allow for many more services for school-age youth than we've been able to provide in the past. So we really continue to remain committed to serving students, even with some of the reductions that we've had to make in some of our outreach-based services. We will continue to offer culturally specific story times in our locations for kids and families, the robust collections for children birth to 18, including both digital and print collections, the teen spaces that I meant that are excellent places for teen and tween councils, which are excellent volunteer opportunities for teens and youth. Additionally, we'll continue to offer our Library Connect program, which allows students to use their student ID card as their library card. So that reaches over 100,000 students in Multnomah County. As I shared previously, though, today, Multnomah County Library continues to invest really robustly in our outreach services. I'm going to reflect on a few of those services so you can understand that we continue to support pre-literacy in our community through these programs. Several of those include our childcare book delivery program, which we have staff who deliver tubs of books to childcares throughout Multnomah County. We also provide mail service of books to folks who are homebound, who are not able to leave their home to come check out materials. We also provide robust services for adults in custody at Inverness Jail and through partnerships at the Columbia River Correctional Institute, and also for youth who are at the Donald E. Long Juvenile Justice Center. We provide one program, we're continuing to fund one program in particular, which is also supported by our Library Foundation, called the Every Child a Reader program. That program reaches over 7,000 families across Multnomah County who speak 40 different languages. That's a program where we provide book bags to students in Head Start programs, home visiting programs, and the book bags get rotated among the children in the classroom or in the home visitor's case load. And that ensures that children have access to culturally specific, language specific books and materials, particularly families who may not have time or may be limited in their ability to come into our library spaces. So we're proud to be able to continue that program into the future, particularly with support of our Library Foundation. I did reflect, and sorry, lastly, I shared previously some of the responses that we've heard from our patrons. We have communicated the changes about our school-based outreach services to all of the superintendents and teachers and principals in our schools that receive those services currently. What I've heard, particularly from superintendents, is an understanding of sort of the situation that each of our agencies face around making difficult choices to end some services, but we have made it very clear that we are continuing those partnerships, continuing those relationships with our schools, in particular the sort of connections that our neighborhood youth librarians have with their local schools to continue to serve youth in a way that's responsive to their needs.
Just as a follow-up to the communication piece, it sounds like you're communicating about the changes with school districts, with community members, for example, about like programs that may have changed, or it sounds like you're still offering a number of outreach services that are still very prioritizing like bilingual, culturally specific populations. But if there's a perception that something might be going away and something might not replace that, and I'll share just an example, hearing that like the Listos program is going away, right? And that's a very beloved program in the community, but something else may serve like that in the different outreach that you're doing that may serve families differently. So I'm curious as to like how you might be communicating with community members and families that are feeling the loss of a program like that.
Yeah, so one of the things we started in, I think, beginning of 2025 as we rolled out the staffing plan is what I call the director's desk. So it's a message to the community that I send out monthly, and we post it on our library website and also send it out in our newsletter that kind of shares about the high-level changes that are happening in the library and what folks can expect directly from my voice. So I'm representing sort of that voice. In addition to that, though, we know our staff obviously are really directly connecting with our community members. So for staff in the programs that are changing, we developed talking points so that staff were supported in their engagement with families and folks who may be concerned about services ending, in addition to equipping our broader library staff with those similar talking points, particularly our contact center, where people may be calling or writing in.
Will people see their jobs change as a result of the staffing plan that you've mentioned in terms of duties and responsibilities? Is there any anticipated retraining needed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the nature of public library work is changing, and positions across the system have been evolving to reflect that for some time, right? With the evolution and continued advancement of technology, the library continually adapts and has to keep robust training and support for our staff so that they can be able to help people who are walking into our doors and encountering new technology, new ways to access information. So, but the staffing plan does include changes to some positions and services so that we're aligning our staffing structure to meet our new service priorities and the voter-backed expansion of our library spaces. So in terms of our executive team's strategy in developing the staffing plan, we focused on reallocating existing resources to ensure sufficient staffing at our library locations and maintaining an objective to avoid layoffs wherever possible. And I'm happy that we were able to do that. But because of the sort of economic environment we are in, we didn't have additional revenue to add staff, right? So we have had to reassign staff into new roles, and a small or relatively small group of those staff are going to be in completely new types of positions. And so I'll reflect on that in just a minute. But in terms of process, our executive team to develop the staffing plan, we calculated how many hours of service point coverage we needed in all of our libraries, and we used that calculation to determine our FTE needs by library locations. And as I shared, we needed to meet the requirements of those expanded service points by reallocating staffing resources within our system. We reviewed changes by employees, and we made additional adjustments with the goal of minimizing the financial impact on individual staff members and, again, avoiding layoffs, and to maintain job classifications wherever possible. So the changes that are introduced in the staffing plan will begin to take effect July 1, but we'll be implementing them over the course of FY26. In total, there are 7 employees who are experiencing a change in job classification with either a neutral or a positive impact on wages. There are 5 employees who will be downwardly classified, but with no reduction in salaries. We've been able to redline their salaries. We also will provide training for the staff who are changing roles. In particular, we are ending the library safety liaison classification, and those individuals will have an opportunity to promote to become library assistants. And so of all of the changes that are occurring in terms of staff positions, probably those will require the sort of most training and support as they transition into those roles. In addition, several of our library outreach specialist and program specialist positions within our community services work unit are shifting to be in better alignment with our library priorities. So they're maintaining their classification, or in some places downwardly classifying from program specialist senior to program specialist, but still maintaining a focus on outreach and engagement, but with a shifted scope.
I think communicated staffing plan prioritizes safety, topic of concern for staff in recent years. And, we hear anecdotes of librarians leaving their chosen profession because of safety concerns, which is tragic in my mind. So what are the latest trends you are seeing with security incidents? Up, down, flat?
My colleague Dave Ratliff is going to answer this question. I do want to say one brief thing. I just flew in last night from the Urban Libraries Council CEO Roundtable, so I got to spend a few days with directors and CEOs from across the country who work in urban libraries. And of the folks that I spoke with, nearly every single one of them brought up security as one of the most significant challenges they face. So I want to note that unfortunately, Multnomah County Library is not alone in this issue, and there's a lot of folks who are thinking deeply about how we respond to the evolving security needs within our spaces. So Dave, go ahead.
So I'll start by saying that whatever happens in our community happens in our libraries. And that's largely because we are one of the few truly public places left in society. You don't have to buy something to come in. You can stay for more than 20 minutes. You don't have to be a member to come in and use the library. It's truly open to absolutely everyone. That's a wonderful thing, but that also means that many of the people coming in are experiencing fairly significant challenges in their lives. Substance use is a major problem, as we have been discussing earlier today in some of the programs that the county is working on. Things like that still affect libraries and will continue to affect libraries well into the future. And so what we are really focusing on, particularly as, quite honestly, mental illness resources are simply not available in the way that they need to be, really probably anywhere in the country right now. So we focus on de-escalation and trauma-informed practices to the degree that that's possible. And we partner with the Crisis Prevention Institute. We have people who are certified trainers who do the de-escalation training for that, who basically work with all of what we call PICs, or persons in charge, as well as group of safety coordinators that we have who are kind of super PICs, I guess you would say, who really that's the entire focus of their job, whereas other folks who are people in charge, either managers or have other positions in the library and have opted in. We also have social workers, and we are also now using peer navigation specialists at the Central Library. So we're really approaching this from a whole lot of different perspectives, not just sort of traditional, straightforward, strict security, because doing nothing but enforcement isn't going to help resolve this situation for a lot of folks. That being said, we also work with the Workplace Security Department in the county, and they manage the contract with Intercon Security, who provide security at a number of our locations. Annie mentioned that the library safety liaison role is going away. Those folks, locations that still need somebody will be covered by Intercon Security. And a good portion of the reason for that really is that maintaining our own supply of backup people every time someone is sick or on vacation is incredibly difficult. And that's a whole lot easier to do through a massive contract that's countywide with Intercon. So but to directly answer your question, we are not seeing an increase or a decrease really in number of incidents. We tend to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 what we call major disruptions a month across, and that's across 19 libraries. Granted, a lot of those happen at the Central Library. Those are things that are anything from substance use in restrooms to someone having a mental health crisis who really can't manage to maintain in a civil way. Sometimes that includes threats. So those are major disruptions, and anything that's illegal falls into that category as well. The number of incidents that we have that are not major incidents can be anything from, falling asleep, and we do have to wake folks up in order to make sure that they're okay, to really minimal things like someone using inappropriate language and tone with either staff or with the public. So in those, those happen every day. And those recently, the last 2 months, have been in the 300 to 400 a month range. So it's a lot. It's really a lot. And it is a significant impact on libraries overall. I will also say, on a personal note, I worked at the New York Public Library in 2000. And speaking of leaving because of security incidents, I left the New York Public Library because of the number of security incidents and the lack of support in that environment at that time. That has obviously changed dramatically for them over the last 25 years as well. But really, this is something that it may be more extreme now than it's been in the past because of various societal ills, but it's not new to libraries. And one of our librarians who started the year that I was born, she is now retired, but she worked for me for quite a while, used to talk about people selling cannabis at the library in the 70s. So again, anything that's public happens in our spaces. We do have a new security incident reporting system coming online, which is excellent. Our current system is kind of a homegrown system that lacks nuanced evaluation and data capabilities. So we're adding a lot of those things together manually, and it takes an enormous amount of time. So that will launch this summer. That is a crisis management software that's like an enterprise level software used by multiple organizations across the country. So we're excited about that. That'll give us a whole lot more insight into really what's actually happening. We also have 4 key measurable outcomes that we'll begin evaluating our security program on. That is transparency to staff as well as patrons, accountable security practices, reduced incidents and patron exclusions through de-escalation, and reduction in the percentage of incidents. And that's really the ratio of the number of people who come through the door to the number of incidents that we have. Because we're having larger spaces opening, we are likely to see actually overall an increase. There simply are more locations and more people and more space. But as long as we can, pardon me, keep that low enough or keep that at a decreasing level per capita sort of, then we feel like we will be doing pretty well. We are really trying to take a holistic approach and to do things like having external outside the building, what we call activation, which at the Central Library is likely to mean anything from events and performances on the terrace to, we're exploring all kinds of things. Can we have food carts parked next to the library? Can we have bike rental kiosks? And really anything that keeps that space, particularly on the sides of the building, which are not heavily trafficked areas, more utilized and active with desirable behaviors. And we are hopeful that that will result in some good changes. We also have partnerships. We are working with the Portland Police Department. We met with them last week. We meet with the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, and we also are working with, as I said earlier, the Workplace Security Department to really try and have a cohesive approach where we're all working together toward the same ultimate goals.
Thank you. But just a quick about the pick. You talked to us about that last year, and has that worked in terms of recruiting people to step up to be picks or super picks apparently? And how's that going?
The folks that are allowed to opt in are standard classifications. They're not the super picks and they're not the managers. Super picks and managers, that's what they signed up for and that's what they have to do. Keeping the balance with everybody else is challenging, particularly if people at a certain location decide, you know what, I've had enough of this right now. I'm going to take some time off, which is certainly understandable, but it does make it difficult to maintain critical mass at every location at all times. And because of that, we do have several new supervisor positions that are in the permanent budget this year, because those are folks who have to service PIC and so are opting in simply by virtue of choosing to apply for that position.
How are your contracted security services deployed? Are they at certain branches or for certain hours? Or
Yeah, currently we have contracted security at Central, Midland, Hollywood, Holgate, Gresham, Northwest, and Gregory Heights. I had to write that down because I can never remember all of those things off the top of my head. And those get coverage all open hours. Central Library usually has 4 officers. Midland Library always has 2. So some of them are much more robustly covered than others.
And are they in uniform then, like a security?
Yes, they are in uniform.
So the library moved to standardize hours across all branches with a focus on being open later hours than before. What has been the feedback from the community and from staff about this, the hours changing?
Thank you for the question. So as you noted, we did standardize all library hours on December 1st, and we implemented that across all of our locations as well as our contact center, where we receive phone calls. So this change really, just to sort of reflect on why we did this, it was really done both to offer a consistent experience for patrons to understand that they didn't have to like Google every time they wanted to know the hours, that they could know, oh, all the locations are open all the same hours, but also primarily to aid in staff scheduling across the system to avoid service disruptions, because being open an 8-hour day that's the same schedule across all of our locations allows us the flexibility to reassign staff if there are call outs that at a level that requires us to send a staff person over from a different location. So we know from surveys and from patron comments recently and in the past that our library patrons want more hours. And so that's always something that we're trying to maintain, which is to offer the most amount of hours that we can, but within our budgets and staffing. Some patrons would like more hours earlier in the day, and some would also like libraries to be open later. So with these new hours, we really tried to kind of split the difference and have some evening hours, but also sort of maintain that 8-hour day. In the library's 2024 patron survey, which was administered this fall, so it was administered before the change of the hours, we did though still receive suggestions for improvement in hours. We had 66 comments of patrons who wanted us to be open earlier, and 47 comments of patrons who wanted us to be open later. And then 40 people responded saying that they wanted standardized hours. So as expected, we have had mixed reaction to the change because we will not be able to offer hours that sort of accommodate the various needs of people across our community. But we have heard comments that people appreciate the consistency of knowing sort of what to expect from each locations. Also for staff members, the change has been a lot easier for them to be able to pick up shifts because they don't have to sort of adjust their schedule and around sort of their family needs or their personal needs. The library can also better fill our last-minute absences, which really helps us avoid service disruptions for library patrons. And we also, by aligning the library's contact center hours, that has allowed us to simplify our scheduling for our call center and also make it sort of less confusing for our public, knowing that our phones are open the same hours as our library locations. So I was actually, this was sort of one of the first major changes I made in the director role, and I was pretty nervous, and not knowing what the public would, how the public would respond. And we actually didn't receive the amount. I thought we might receive a bit more sort of concern, but really there was actually, I think, more than anything, always wanting more hours, but also sort of the appreciation of having the consistent experience.
Sure. This is our last question. And you talked about this already, a little bit about your staffing reallocations, but the challenges for to cover your operating expenses isn't going to go away, and the county's budget office is projecting future operating deficits potentially. How are you planning ahead now for that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We spend a lot of time talking and thinking about this. And it's not a new question for us, right? The library district has maintained kind of a cautious and thoughtful approach to budget development ever since its inception. And while the projected operating deficits that are on the horizon are going to be challenging, we feel like we've got the right sort of systems and tools in place to be able to navigate this downturn as best as we can. And it's just something that we have been thinking through for a long time, because the sort of structural operating deficit nature of the library district is not new to us, right? One of the things that we do is we work really closely with the county economists to understand the property tax trends that are going to be affecting our revenue forecast. And we're obviously in regular communication about the impacts of those trends and sort of what our options are going to be over the long term. So just making sure that we are really tied into the revenue piece of the forecast and sort of what that's looking like. We're also making every effort and kind of constantly reevaluating what our options are to bend down our cost curve, and especially where we can bend down the cost curve without sort of unduly impacting our service levels. So we are in regular evaluation of what our budget versus actuals monitoring looks like, right? Like where can we sort of realign our resources where we're seeing underspending without affecting our service levels. We're also partnering and have been in sort of regular communication with the Department of County Assets on ways that in looking forward, we can reduce our internal service rates, or at least have a better understanding of what those levers are going to be to control our costs moving forward. And I'll give you a couple of examples of what that might look like. So right now, the Department of County Assets is having folks review their telephone usage, right? And we're undergoing a review of what our device count, so our laptops and our desktops, and those things that are big drivers of overall costs, especially from an internal service cost perspective. We are in discussions of what a review of our janitorial costs and what that contract might look like. And we are, as we move forward, undergoing a building by building review of what our operations and maintenance costs are going to be going forward. So just across the board, taking every opportunity to look at what that budget versus actuals costs is across kind of an entirely new library system, and trying to bend down that cost curve wherever we can. We've also realized efficiencies gained from a lot of the new technologies that were bond funded. And so we have new automated materials handling, new intelligent materials management system. Did I get that right? I always want to call it something different. That frees up staff time to focus on patron support, right? So we've already kind of talked through how we're realigning staff time to focus on patron support in our new larger locations. But that kind of constant view of how can we realign our existing resources to our highest priority sort of needs and sort of services, is that lens is going to kind of carry us forward. We've also done a lot of work that Annie has kind of talked about throughout the budget development process to clarify what our service priorities are and articulating what the library does and really providing a framework to guide our decision-making processes as an organization. Those priorities help us focus when we've got a sort of a limited resource base, right? And it helps us determine, as the library, what is really kind of within our purview, what's in our lane as a library, and what are those services that might be better suited for a community partnerships model. You all that have been on the TSCC for a number of years might remember that last year we added a community partnerships manager, and that position has already started to pay off in dividends, right? And so we're starting to see our new larger spaces be activated through community partnerships, and we're able to leverage sort of partnerships through the community and leverage resources that are sort of beyond what we would be able to maybe do by ourselves through that model. Another thing that we're kind of undertaking is making sure that we have a deep understanding of what our patrons value about the library. As our resources tighten and we're looking out ahead, what is it that the library patrons value about the library? And as we look ahead to potential reductions on the horizon, making sure that our revamped library patron survey, which now every other year is going to have a qualitative patron survey, so that we're not just asking the questions, but we're understanding the why behind those things. So using that information along with the deep community engagement that's going to inform our next phase of the library strategic plan to really inform our future budgeting efforts. And so taking all that information as we move forward is going to be really critical to kind of answering some of these questions about a challenging forecast. So we do have a challenging forecast. We're not unique in that. But we also know that there's a lot of variables and unknowns right now. The FY27 is going to be the first year that we're really kind of stress testing some of the new staffing models, some of the new operational models that we've been planning for, that we have in place, but it's going to be the first year that we have all of our new library locations open. And so for the time being, we're trying to make the best plans that we can, trying to make smart use of fund balance until we have some better information. And we are going to be keeping a really close eye on that forecast and pivoting as we need to.
Well, based on that answer, you're looking way ahead, and I know staff and your other costs to operate the library, looking at technology and other kinds of tools that you can use, partnerships. So thanks for that answer. It was very comprehensive.
With that, we'll end our discussion. Thank you again for sharing. The library really is the cornerstone, one of the cornerstones of our community, and I think as we talk to the county about the kind of the balance between like the community building and the managing the circumstances. I think the library is a good microcosm for that, and representative of the good work being done in this county. So thank you again. We'll do our small bit of business. I will close the hearing and open a regular business meeting of the TSCC. Commissioners, do you have any comments on the budget? Allegra, will you please share the staff recommendations for the certification letter?
Yes, and we would first like to thank library staff for their partnership, not only for this bit of the process, but throughout the entire year. You're always so quick to respond to our questions and also proactively reaching out with any budget law questions, and we just really appreciate that. For fiscal year 25-26 approved budget, we as staff found the budget estimates to be reasonable for the purposes stated and in substantial compliance with budget law. Staff suggests no recommendations or objections.
May I have a motion authorizing the commission to sign the certification letter as recommended?
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Tab.
Second.
Good. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The library budget is so certified by TSCC. Allegra follows up with your letter so you can package everything for budget adoption, and that will adjourn today's hearing. Thank you, everyone.